Everybody wants to know how to heel toe downshift on the streets. But how do you actually do it when you're on, your city driving? Just on your regular roads, right? How do you really approach heel toe downshifting? In this video, I'm going to show you a few things that I've learned over my 2 years of heel toe downshifting. A few mistakes that I've made, tips and tricks here and there to help you become a more proficient manual driver, especially with heel toe downshifting. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So the first lesson that I've learned when it comes to heel toe downshifting is the brakes always comes first. A lot of times when I'm heel toe downshifting, what ends up happening is I focus too much on the downshift and I forget to realize that it's actually braking that's the most important thing in the first place. So a lot of times I end up stopping really close to someone, nearly rear-ending them, only because I focus too much on trying to get my shifting right. So I'll either brake check the guy behind me because I didn't focus enough on the brakes, or I'll just brake too little and have too much emphasis, right? Too much of my focus on the downshifting aspect, and I just end up messing up my stopping, right? My braking. And what you have to realize is you need to change your mindset to braking first and then downshift. So the next time you try to heel toe when you're approaching, let's say, a stoplight, or when you're just entering a corner, you need to actually think about your speed, right? You need to focus on how much you're actually slowing down in the moment. And then the downshifting comes second, right? Then the heel towing aspect comes second. If you don't brake properly, if you don't slow down properly, there's no point of shifting gears, because that just makes your corner entry or your slowing down dangerous, and we don't want that. So next time you're slowing down and you attempt to heel toe, really put more of your focus on the slowing down aspect, and then you can focus on your gear shifts and all that fancy stuff later. It's always important to focus on your braking. And that brings me to my second point. If you focus on braking, how do you know how much RPM you are supposed to raise if you're not having enough attention on the rev matching aspect of heel towing? And this is where I'll give you a very interesting concept to think about. If you are able to downshift perfectly every time, rev match perfectly every time, how would you approach the downshift? How would you approach your inputs? How would you try to, raise the revs and bite point, whatever? How would you approach them? You'd be pretty damn confident, right? You wouldn't hesitate on the downshift. You wouldn't think too much about the downshift, about how much RPMs you have to raise. All you're thinking about is simply the actions, right? Simply just clutch in, move down a gear, revs, and clutch up. You're just thinking about the action, right? You're not overthinking about the numbers and all the RPMs and all that stuff. You're simply thinking about rev matching. Just doing the rev match, right? Just stabbing the gas. When you start thinking about the numbers, that's when the first point happens. That's when the issue of focusing too much on the revs and you lose control of your brakes happens. But the interesting thing is, when you stop trying to be careful with your downshift and just go for it, a lot of times you'll be able to downshift smoother, because your inputs are now more fluid. You're not overthinking about them, which makes your inputs also more consistent. And in the long term, once you have gotten used to your car and how much RPM you have to give, you'll be able to downshift smoothly every single time, be able to heel toe smoothly every single time without having to think about the RPMs at all. Like when I'm driving and I'm slowing down, let's say for that red light, I did not think about how much RPM I had to raise. It's simply just muscle memory, right? But that's what you have to realize. You have to stop thinking about how much RPM you have to raise. Once you stop trying to be smooth with your rev matches, You'll be more fluid with your inputs. You'll be more confident with your downshifts. And even if your shifts aren't smooth just yet, you will subconsciously understand what you have to do the next time to get a smoother rev match for your heel toe. You don't have to actively thinking about how much RPM should I jab the next time, should I raise the next time. It'll just happen subconsciously, and you just have to trust that. And you just have to downshift as if you are going to be smooth every single time, as if the rev match is going to be perfect every single time. And that's when you can downshift smoothly without worrying about the numbers, without worrying about the revs, and to be able to focus on your brakes, to focus on how much you can slow down, how much you need to slow down. Another thing I've learned over my years of trying to heel toe on the road is you sometimes have to block change your gears. What usually happens when you are just going about your day at city speeds is that if you are not driving fast enough, the difference in RPM between the gears won't be drastic, because that's just how math works, right? The gear ratio remains the same, so that at a faster speed, the RPM difference will be greater between the gears, and at a slower speed, the RPM's difference will be less. So what ends up happening is when I intend to slow down for a corner, and let's say I slow down a little bit quicker than usual. If I'm traveling at 60k in 5th gear right now, that's about 2000 RPM, and I want to slow down to, let's say, 40 k's an hour. If I try to heel toe into 4th gear, what ends up happening is, even though I try to raise the revs because I intend to downshift into a lower gear, the fact that my car has slowed down to around 40 k's, or even just slowing down, has caused the correct RPM for 4th gear at a slower speed to be the same as what it is in 5th gear, if not lower. So let me try to explain it again. You're traveling at 5th gear at 2000 RPM. You intend to downshift into a lower gear, into 4th gear, but the problem is, at that slower speed, the RPM in 4th gear has also shrunken. So then, even though you are trying to heel toe to raise the RPM, you actually end up having to wait for the RPM to drop below what it was in 5th gear anyways. So that it makes the whole heel toeing cycle really messy, and you don't have that much control over your revs. So that's the reason you have to block change a lot of the times when you try to heel toe on the streets. When you are block changing your gears, let's say going from 5th to 3rd instead of 5th to 4th, you're effectively increasing the RPM difference between your current gear and the lower gear you're entering into, right? You're raising the gear ratio, so then when you slow down to the lower speed that you intend to, you can actually raise the RPM, and your heel toe movement, right, your heel toe cycle will feel so much more natural, the entire process, compared to if you try to sequentially downshift from 5th to 4th and then 4th to 3rd, but the RPM's difference isn't so great at the lower speeds. Another thing you could do if you really want to sequentially downshift, because I'll be honest, block changing gears is a bit awkward because you're not really used to be doing it. You're more used to downshift sequentially, right? As you're going from 5th to 4th and then 4th to 3rd, it's a lot easier to visualize what the RPMs is for the next lowest gear sequentially, compared to if you're trying to visualize what the RPMs are 2 gears apart, 3 gears apart. That gets really awkward. You don't really know the numbers. If you really want to sequentially downshift, what I recommend you to do, and that's what I've done, is I rev match sequentially first. And once I have rev matched to the lower gear, the current speed that I'm traveling for the lower gear now becomes a speed that is somewhat fast enough for me to heel toe to the next lower gear. Does that make sense? So let's say I'm going from 5th gear at 60 k's an hour. I rev match in the 4th first at 60 k's an hour, so then from 4th gear to 3rd gear, I can actually heel toe into the lower speed that I'm gonna go into. Let's say I'm gonna heel toe to 45 k's an hour from 60k. I can actually heel toe from 4th to 3rd because the RPM's difference is great enough to the point where at 45 km an hour, 3rd gear will be at a greater RPM than 4th gear. I know this is a lot of numbers and hopefully not boring stuff that you guys are having to take into, but this is just what I've been through, man, and I just want you guys to be able to heel toe effectively on the streets. It's a really good technique for, you know, keeping your car in control, having a little bit of fun, driving spiritedly. But you need to know a few things that will help you effectively heel toe on the streets, because it's not, I'd say heel toe downshifting on the streets would be harder than heel toe downshifting on track or when you're driving, you know, spiritedly at faster speeds. That's just a few things you have to know to make the entire process smoother, to make the entire process safer on the streets. But that's all I wanted to say for this video. I hope you found the advice helpful. Hopefully you can take these advice and start implementing them on the streets and start heel toe downshifting like the badass you were supposed to be. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.